The massive observation vessel hung silently in the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, its hull absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Inside the bridge, senior observer Helen Clark examined the data streaming across her displays with practiced efficiency. Her 6 slender limbs moved across the controls with centuries of experience, each gesture precise and economical. Helen was a Vreen, a species that had spent the last 3,000 years watching younger civilizations stumble toward the stars. This assignment was supposed to be routine. Just another primitive species conducting their first clumsy military exercises in space. She had seen dozens just like it. Status report, Helen said, her voice translated from clicks and whistles into the common language used by all Concordat species. 27 human vessels are assembling near their 4th planet, responded Robert Mills, the tactical analyst. Robert was a Keltharn, his insectoid body covered in dark chitinous armor that gleamed under the bridge lights. His multiple eyes tracked dozens of data streams simultaneously. They call this Operation Convergence. Their largest combined military exercise to date. Helen's sensory stalks tilted slightly. Combined? You mean they still maintain separate military forces? Affirmative, Commander. Despite achieving spaceflight, humanity remains divided into competing political entities called nations. Some of these nations were at war with each other less than a century ago. Fascinating, murmured Emma Davies from her station. Emma was young for a Phosian, barely 200 years old. Her energy-based form shimmered with shades of blue and green, colors that indicated curiosity. They reached space while still fragmented politically? Most species unify first. Most species are more sensible, Robert said with a dismissive click of his mandibles. Look at their vessel designs. 7 completely different engineering philosophies. Incompatible communication systems that they've jury-rigged to work together. This fleet has ships built by groups that were enemies a few decades ago. Helen studied the tactical display. Robert was right. The human fleet looked like a collection of spare parts rather than a unified fighting force. Some vessels were sleek and curved, others were blocky and utilitarian. Their propulsion systems ranged from efficient fusion drives to crude chemical rockets augmented with nuclear pulse systems. What are the simulation parameters? Helen asked. Emma brought up the relevant data. Defense of a civilian colony against a superior hostile force. The humans have divided their fleet in half. 13 ships will defend. 14 ships will attack. The attacking force has been designated as the superior enemy. Helen's stalk stiffened with surprise. They're testing themselves against a superior opponent? Not an equal force. That is correct, Commander. Robert's mandibles clattered with amusement. Foolish. When the Concordat evaluates species, we want to see them demonstrate their strengths, not expose their weaknesses. These humans are going to fail spectacularly, and we'll have front-row seats. Perhaps, Helen said slowly. But why would they deliberately set up a scenario designed for failure? Because they're primitive, Robert replied with confidence. They don't understand proper military doctrine yet. The Concordat has refined naval warfare over 10,000 years. There are established formations, proven tactics, and time-tested strategies. These humans are just making it up as they go along. Emma's form flickered thoughtfully. I've been studying their cultural databases. Humans have been fighting wars for their entire recorded history. 5,000 years of continuous conflict. They have libraries full of military theory. Against each other, Robert countered. Primitive tribes fighting with primitive weapons. That experience means nothing in space combat. Helen activated the full sensor suite. Perhaps. But the Concordat Council wants a complete evaluation before we extend membership. We need to understand how they think, not just what technology they possess. I want every communication channel monitored. Record everything. Down in the Mars orbital zone, the human fleet continued its final preparations. Admiral Thomas Wright stood on the bridge of the destroyer designated UDS Defiant. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in military service. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced Captain Victoria Hayes over the communication channel. Her voice came from the frigate Valiant, stationed 30,000 kilometers away. Excellent, Thomas replied. He looked around his own bridge at the younger officers manning their stations. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind everyone what we're doing here today. This is not about winning. The Concordat is watching us right now from that ship out past Neptune. They want to see how we handle pressure. Should we try to impress them, sir? Asked Commander Peter Walsh, his tactical officer. No, Thomas said firmly. We should try to break ourselves. High Command wants to know our weaknesses before we face a real enemy. They want to know what tactics fail, what systems break down, and how we respond when plans fall apart. Because plans always fall apart. He paused, looking at the tactical display showing all 27 ships. The Concordat has been spacefaring for thousands of years. They have perfect formations and flawless doctrine. We're not going to beat them at their own game. So we're going to play a different game entirely. Victoria's voice came through again. Distributed command protocol is active, Admiral. Every captain has the mission parameters. How we accomplish the objective is up to individual discretion. Perfect. Remember, people, there is no unified battle plan. You know the goal. Protect the civilians. How you do that is your decision. If you see an opportunity, take it. If you need to break away from the group, break away. Think for yourselves. Thomas smiled slightly. Let's show the Concordat what organized chaos looks like. Begin the simulation. Aboard the Quiet Reflection, Helen watched the human fleet begin to move. The vessels scattered in seemingly random directions with no obvious coordination or formation. Exactly as predicted, Robert announced with satisfaction. Complete chaos within the first 30 seconds. This will be over quickly. But Helen continued watching carefully. Something about the seemingly random movements felt deliberate. She increased sensor resolution, tracking each vessel individually. Perhaps, she said quietly. Or perhaps we're about to learn something new. The human fleet scattered across the Mars orbital zone like leaves caught in a storm. From aboard the Quiet Reflection, Robert Mills watched with smug satisfaction as the defending ships broke formation and headed in completely different directions. Look at this disaster, Robert said, highlighting several vessels on the tactical display. 3 destroyers are broadcasting distress signals. Their power readings show reactor failures. 2 frigates are spinning out of control. The civilian transports are fleeing in panic. This is exactly what happens when a species tries space combat before they're ready. Helen leaned forward in her command chair, her sensory stalks tracking the movement patterns carefully. Something felt wrong. The chaos seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed. Emma, analyze those distress signals. Are they genuine? Helen asked. The young Phosian's form brightened as she processed the data. The signals follow standard emergency protocols, Commander. But wait, the reactor signatures don't match. Those destroyers still have full power. They're faking the failures. What? Robert's mandibles clattered in confusion. Why would they deliberately appear disabled? They got their answer seconds later. The attacking fleet, confident in their numerical advantage and seeing easy targets ahead, moved in aggressively. 14 ships closed in on what they believed were 3 helpless destroyers drifting powerless in space. Then everything changed. The lead destroyer, the UDS Defiant, erupted with full engine power at point-blank range. Its weapon systems, which had appeared offline, fired in a devastating broadside that caught 2 attacking vessels completely by surprise. The simulated damage indicators showed both ships crippled instantly. Impossible, Robert exclaimed. They were dead in space. They were waiting, Helen corrected quietly. The other 2 disabled destroyers executed the same maneuver, their weapons tearing through the attacking formation that had bunched together for the easy kills. Within 90 seconds, the attacking force had lost 4 ships to targets they thought were helpless. But the surprises continued. The civilian transport vessels that had been fleeing in apparent panic suddenly reversed course. Their cargo bays opened, revealing they had been screening actual military frigates hiding in their sensor shadows. The frigates burst forward with weapons hot, catching the attackers from an unexpected angle. This is not standard tactical doctrine, Robert protested, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly as he tried to process what he was seeing. The Concordat Military Academy teaches 7 fundamental formations for fleet engagement. The humans aren't using any of them. They're just improvising. Helen pulled up the communication channels between human ships. What she heard was equally chaotic and equally fascinating. Hayes, you've got 3 bogies coming around your port side, came Admiral Wright's voice. I see them, Admiral. Engaging, Captain Victoria Hayes responded. Negative, Hayes. Pull back and let Bennett take them. With respect, sir, I have a better angle. Engaging on my initiative. There was a pause, then Wright's voice came back. Approved. Execute your plan. Robert's translator struggled to convey his shock. The subordinate officer just refused a direct order, and the superior officer approved it? That's a breakdown of command structure. Or something else entirely, Emma said, her form flickering with excitement. Look at the human military doctrine files. They have a concept called commander's intent. Superior officers provide the goal and the boundaries, but individual commanders are expected to use their own judgment for execution. The battle continued to unfold in ways that violated every principle the Concordat had established over thousands of years of warfare. Captain James Bennett used his destroyer's engine wash as a weapon, the superheated plasma destabilizing an enemy vessel's navigation systems. Commander Lisa Parker deliberately vented atmosphere from her frigate, creating a debris cloud that scattered sensor readings across a 50-kilometer radius. Another captain, Michael Stevens, fired his weapons at what appeared to be empty space, but the shots ricocheted off ice particles and struck an enemy ship from an impossible angle. They're using the environment as a weapon, Helen observed. Not just fighting in space but fighting with space itself. The attacking fleet adjusted their tactics, reforming into a standard Concordat assault wedge. It was a proven formation, one that had won battles for 3,000 years. The textbook response would be for the defending fleet to form a defensive sphere and concentrate fire. The humans did nothing of the sort. Instead, each defending ship chose a completely different response. Some accelerated directly toward the wedge. Others fled at maximum speed. 2 ships simply stopped moving entirely. One frigate began tumbling as if hit, while another appeared to be trying to ram the attacking formation. It's complete chaos, Robert insisted. They have no coordination whatsoever. But the results told a different story. The attacking wedge, designed to face organized resistance, found itself fighting 27 different battles simultaneously. Every defending ship presented a unique problem requiring a unique solution. The attacking commanders couldn't predict what any individual human ship would do because the humans themselves were making decisions in real time based on immediate circumstances. A Concordat fleet fought like a single organism with many parts. The human fleet fought like 27 individual predators who happened to be hunting the same prey. Captain Hayes screamed past an attacking cruiser at full speed, her weapons firing continuously. She was losing the exchange, her shields failing, but she was drawing fire away from the civilian transports. Just as her ship was about to be destroyed, Commander Walsh's destroyer appeared from behind an ice asteroid and crippled the cruiser with a perfectly timed strike. Did they plan that? Robert asked. I don't think so, Emma replied, studying the communication logs. Hayes saw an opportunity to draw fire. Walsh saw Hayes in trouble and reacted. No coordination. Just adaptation. The simulation reached its midpoint. The defending fleet was being systematically destroyed. By every conventional measure they were losing badly. But the civilian transports, the actual objective of the exercise, were steadily moving toward the designated safe zone. Helen checked the evacuation statistics. 87% of the civilian vessels had already escaped. The defending fleet was dying, but it was dying while completing its mission. They're sacrificing themselves, Robert said quietly, his earlier smugness completely gone. Yes, Helen agreed. But more importantly, they're learning. Watch the communication channels. The human commanders were talking constantly. Sharing what worked, what failed, what surprised them. Winners and losers didn't matter. Every engagement was treated as valuable data. Bennett, that engine wash trick was brilliant, came Wright's voice. Mark it for the after-action review. Parker, the debris cloud worked perfectly. How much atmosphere did you vent? Stevens, that ricochet shot was either genius or incredibly lucky. Which was it? They were teaching each other in the middle of battle. Helen sat back in her chair, her earlier boredom completely vanished. This is not what I expected. They're still losing, Robert pointed out, though his voice lacked conviction. Are they? Helen pulled up the tactical analysis. The attacking fleet has expended 3 times the expected ammunition. They've suffered twice the anticipated casualties. And the defenders have successfully evacuated nearly 90% of the civilians despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Emma's form shimmered bright yellow with realization. They're not trying to win the battle. They're trying to win the war. The battle entered its final phase, and the human tactics became even more unusual. Helen watched in fascination as Captain Victoria Hayes made a decision that defied all military logic. She's opening her airlocks, Robert said, his voice filled with disbelief. All of them. She's venting everything into space. The frigate Valiant spun slowly, releasing clouds of atmosphere, debris and equipment into the void. Within seconds, a massive sphere of scattered particles surrounded the ship, creating a zone of complete sensor chaos that stretched for kilometers in every direction. She's blind, Robert continued. The attacking ships are blind. Everyone in that area is fighting without sensors now. Exactly, Emma said softly. She just turned a technological battle into something much more primitive. Intuition and guesswork instead of precise targeting. 3 attacking vessels entered the debris cloud, confident their superior numbers would compensate for the reduced visibility. 2 of them collided with each other in the confusion. The third emerged on the far side with simulated critical damage from weapons fire it never saw coming. Hayes's voice crackled over the communication channel. Debris field is highly effective for defensive actions. Recommend other ships try similar tactics in close quarters. Noted, Admiral Wright responded. Good work, Valiant. Even if you did just destroy half your own ship to do it. Hayes laughed. It's a simulation, sir. Might as well test the crazy ideas now. Across the battlefield, Commander Lisa Parker was implementing her own unconventional approach. Her destroyer had taken heavy damage and was clearly doomed. Instead of fighting to the last moment, she did something that made Robert's mandibles freeze in shock. She's surrendering, he whispered. In a simulation. Why would she surrender in a simulation? The attacking ships moved in to capture the disabled destroyer, following standard Concordat procedure for accepting surrender. 3 vessels surrounded Parker's ship, their weapons powered down to minimal levels as per the ancient protocols of honorable warfare. Parker waited until all 3 ships were within 200 meters. Then she remote detonated her reactor. The simulated explosion consumed all 4 vessels instantly. The tactical display marked them all as destroyed. She killed herself to take 3 enemies with her, Robert said. His translator struggled to convey his horror. That's not warfare. That's suicide. It's mathematics, Helen corrected. 1 destroyed ship for 3 destroyed enemies. From a purely tactical standpoint, it's an excellent trade. But it violates every principle of honorable combat. The Concordat has rules about surrender. About captured vessels. About treating prisoners with dignity. The humans are not part of the Concordat, Emma reminded him gently. They don't follow our rules. They follow what works. Admiral Wright's voice came through the channel again. Parker, that was either brilliant or insane. Possibly both. Mark it down for review. Everyone else, note that fake surrenders are apparently effective but will probably get us banned from every civilized system in the galaxy. There was laughter on the channel. Laughter during a battle. Helen accessed the human military history database searching for context. What she found was enlightening and disturbing in equal measure. Humanity had spent 5,000 years fighting wars against itself. The database contained thousands of battles, hundreds of different tactical philosophies, and dozens of distinct military traditions. Ancient generals named Alexander and Hannibal. Medieval knights and samurai warriors. Naval commanders from the age of wooden ships. Tank battles and aerial dogfights. Guerrilla warfare and nuclear deterrence. Humanity had tried every possible way to kill itself and had documented all of it in excruciating detail. Look at this, Helen said, displaying some of the records for her crew. A human strategist named Sun Tzu wrote about warfare 2,500 years ago. His principles are still studied. Another named Clausewitz wrote about it 200 years ago. Different eras, different technologies, but both are considered essential reading for human military officers. They've been preparing for war for their entire history, Emma observed. Not just war, Helen corrected. Every kind of war. Against every kind of enemy using every kind of tactic. And they've kept all that knowledge. Every human captain in that fleet has studied battles from dozens of different cultures and time periods. On the tactical display, Captain James Bennett was demonstrating yet another unconventional technique. He positioned his destroyer directly in the path of an enemy cruiser's weapons fire, taking massive damage to his forward shields. But his positioning was precise. The enemy shots that missed him continued on their trajectory and struck another attacking vessel behind him. He's using enemy fire as a weapon, Robert said weakly. By letting himself get shot. Bennett's ship was destroyed moments later, but he had taken 2 enemy vessels with him through sheer positioning and timing. The communication channels filled with analysis and commentary from the other human captains. Did you see that angle Bennett used? We should practice that. The timing would be nearly impossible in a real battle. So we practice until it's not impossible. Helen pulled up more historical data. She found a human saying that appeared repeatedly in their military literature. No plan survives contact with the enemy. It was attributed to someone named von Moltke, a general from Earth's 19th century. They expect their plans to fail, Emma said, reading the same information. Their entire military philosophy is built around the assumption that everything will go wrong. That's insane, Robert protested. Is it? Helen asked. Look at the simulation. How many times have the humans adapted to unexpected situations? How many times have they turned disadvantages into advantages? The defending fleet was down to 7 operational ships. The attacking fleet had 11. By any measure, the battle was lost. But 92% of the civilian transports had reached safety. Captain Michael Stevens, commanding one of the few remaining defenders, made a decision that perfectly illustrated the human approach to warfare. His frigate was damaged, low on ammunition, and facing 3 enemy ships. Instead of retreating or fighting conventionally, he did something completely unexpected. He fired his weapons at a nearby ice asteroid. The shots vaporized a section of ice, creating a massive cloud of steam and particles. The cloud expanded rapidly, pushed by the released pressure from inside the asteroid. It engulfed all 4 ships, creating another zone of sensor blindness. But Stevens had calculated the geometry perfectly. The 3 attacking ships were blinded and confused. Stevens's ship, already damaged and barely functional, simply drifted through the cloud using minimal power that was almost undetectable. He emerged on the far side and escaped while the attacking vessels fired at each other in the confusion. He turned a rock into a weapon, Robert said. His voice had lost all traces of smugness. Now he just sounded tired and confused. A rock and some ice. That's not even technology. That's just cleverness. Exactly, Helen said. They're not fighting with superior technology or better ships. They're fighting with superior adaptation. Every captain thinks differently. Every ship presents a unique problem. There's no pattern to predict because they're not following a pattern. The simulation timer showed 5 minutes remaining. The defending fleet was nearly destroyed, but the mission was nearly complete. The last few civilian transports were approaching the designated safe zone. Admiral Wright's voice came through one final time. All remaining ships, the civilians are almost safe. We've done our job. Let's see how much we can learn in the next 5 minutes. Try something new. Try something crazy. If it works, we'll remember it. If it fails, we'll learn from it. Either way, it's valuable. Helen sat back and watched the final moments of the battle. The humans fought with weapons and tactics that made no sense according to Concordat doctrine, yet somehow they kept achieving their objectives despite losing almost every engagement. They don't fight to win, she said quietly. They fight to learn. Every battle is a school. Every loss is a lesson. That's the most dangerous kind of enemy, Emma observed. One that gets smarter every time you fight them. Robert said nothing. He simply watched the display, his earlier confidence completely shattered. The simulation ended with the defending fleet completely destroyed. Every single ship had been marked as lost. By every conventional military standard, it was a catastrophic defeat. But 94% of the civilian transports had escaped to safety. Helen requested access to the human command communications. She wanted to understand how they processed failure. Most species she had observed would conduct formal reviews weeks later, with careful analysis and official reports. The humans did something entirely different. The moment the simulation ended, all 27 captains began talking at once. Hayes, that debris cloud trick was incredible. How much atmosphere did you vent exactly? Asked Captain Bennett. Everything, Victoria Hayes replied cheerfully. I opened every airlock, every vent, every emergency release. Created a sphere about 3 kilometers across. Visibility was 0 for everyone. Including you, pointed out Commander Walsh. Including me, Hayes agreed. But I knew I was in the center. They had to guess. Advantage goes to the defender in that situation. Parker, we need to talk about that surrender maneuver, Admiral Wright said. His tone was serious but not angry. Effective, yes. But we'd be violating about 50 different interstellar laws if we did that in a real battle. Lisa Parker's voice came through with a hint of amusement. Permission to speak freely, sir? Always. If we're fighting an enemy that wants to exterminate us, I don't care about their laws. I care about survival. There was silence for a moment, then Wright responded. Fair point. But let's keep that particular tactic as a last resort option. Mark it in the records as effective but diplomatically problematic. Robert listened to this exchange with growing confusion. They're not being disciplined for disobeying orders or using forbidden tactics. They're just discussing it like colleagues. Because that's what they are, Emma said. She had been studying human military organizational structures. Human military forces maintain rank and hierarchy, but they also encourage junior officers to think independently. They have a concept called mission command. The superior officer provides the goal and the limits, but how to achieve the goal is left to individual judgment. Helen pulled up more examples from the communication logs. What she found was remarkable. During the battle, there had been dozens of instances where subordinate officers had refused or modified direct orders. Captain Stevens, pull back and regroup with the main force, Admiral Wright had ordered at one point. Negative, sir. I see an opportunity here. Requesting permission to engage independently. What kind of opportunity? There's an asteroid field nearby. I can use it for cover and hit them from an unexpected angle. You'll be outnumbered 3-1. Yes, sir. But they won't expect it. There had been a pause, then Wright had responded. Approved. But if you get yourself killed, I'm putting it in your permanent record. Stevens had laughed. Understood, sir. This is impossible, Robert said. Military discipline requires following orders. Chain of command requires obedience. How can they function as a fighting force if everyone is making their own decisions? They function because everyone understands the mission, Helen said slowly, beginning to grasp the concept. The goal was to protect the civilians. Every captain understood that. How they accomplished it was secondary. Emma displayed a human military term on the main screen. Commander's intent. It's a core principle in human military doctrine. The commanding officer states what needs to be accomplished and why it matters. The subordinate officers figure out how to do it. If circumstances change, the subordinate can adapt without waiting for new orders. But what if the subordinate makes the wrong decision? Robert asked. Then they learn from it, Emma replied simply. She pulled up the current conversation happening between the human captains. Commander Walsh was speaking. I made a mistake in Sector 7. I tried to engage 2 cruisers simultaneously and nearly got destroyed. Bennett had to bail me out. What did you learn? Admiral Wright asked. That my ship can't handle that kind of multi-target engagement. Next time, I'll focus on one target at a time and trust my wingman to handle the other. Good. Anyone else have lessons learned? The captains spent the next 30 minutes discussing every mistake they had made. Not to assign blame but to extract knowledge. Every failure was treated as valuable data for future reference. Helen accessed deeper historical files, looking for the origins of this philosophy. She found military academies where human officers spent years studying historical battles. Not just victories but defeats. Famous disasters were analyzed in as much detail as famous triumphs. They study failure, she said aloud. Deliberately. Systematically. One file caught her attention. A human military academy called West Point required students to study a battle called Little Bighorn, where an arrogant commander had led his entire force to destruction. Another academy analyzed something called the Charge of the Light Brigade, a suicidal cavalry attack that had accomplished nothing except getting hundreds of soldiers killed. Why would they study disasters? Robert asked. To learn what not to do, Emma answered. She was reading the same files. Look at this. They have a saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. They study failures to avoid making the same mistakes. Helen found something else interesting. The human military literature was full of contradictory advice. Ancient generals who advocated completely opposite strategies. Tactical manuals that disagreed with each other fundamentally. Sun Tzu says to attack where the enemy is weak, she read aloud. But Clausewitz says to attack the enemy's center of strength and break it. Both are considered essential reading. How do they resolve the contradiction? They don't, Emma said, her form brightening with understanding. They teach both approaches. Then the individual commander decides which applies to their specific situation. The human communications channel was still active. Captain Hayes was speaking now. I want to thank everyone who covered the civilian transports while I was playing with debris clouds. That's what made the evacuation possible. Team effort, Captain Bennett responded. We all knew the mission. Protect the civilians. We just each did it our own way. Admiral Wright's voice cut in. Exactly right. And that's what I want to emphasize in the after-action report. We had 27 different ships using 27 different tactical approaches, but we all understood the same goal. That's what made it work. Helen pulled up one final piece of human military wisdom. It was a quote from a general named Patton. A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. They value speed over perfection, she observed. They'd rather act imperfectly than wait for the perfect moment. Because the perfect moment never comes, Emma said. They understand that warfare is chaos. Their entire philosophy is built around that understanding. Robert had been silent for several minutes, processing everything he had witnessed. Finally he spoke. We've been fighting wars the same way for 3,000 years. Perfect formations, proven tactics, established doctrine. We've refined our methods to near perfection. Yes, Helen agreed. And these humans who've barely reached space, who have primitive ships and no unified command, just showed us that all our perfection means nothing against an enemy who refuses to be predictable. Yes, Helen said again. The Concordat needs to know about this, Robert said quietly. If humanity can think like this, and if they ever become hostile, we wouldn't stand a chance. We'd be fighting a war we don't know how to fight. Or, Emma suggested gently, we could learn from them. Imagine what the Concordat could accomplish if we combined our technology and experience with their adaptability and creative thinking. Helen sat in silence, watching the human captains continue their animated discussion about tactics and techniques. They were laughing, arguing, teaching each other. Winners and losers mixed together freely, all focused on the same goal, getting better. I need to write my report, Helen said finally. The council needs to understand what we've witnessed here. This isn't just another primitive species stumbling toward the stars. This is something different. Something dangerous and valuable in equal measure. She began composing her thoughts, knowing that what she wrote would change how the Galactic Concordat viewed humanity forever. Helen spent 3 days writing her report. She rewrote it 7 times, each version trying to capture what she had witnessed in words that the Galactic Concordat Council would understand. The problem was that what the humans had demonstrated defied traditional military analysis. Robert visited her quarters on the second day. I've completed my tactical assessment, he said, placing a data chip on her desk. My recommendation is to classify humanity as a high-risk species. They're too unpredictable, too chaotic. If they ever become hostile, they would be extremely difficult to counter. Because we wouldn't know what they'd do next, Helen said. Exactly. Our strategies are based on predicting enemy actions. The humans don't follow predictable patterns. Every captain thinks differently. Every engagement could involve tactics we've never seen before. Robert paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. They scare me, Commander. And I've been analyzing military threats for 200 years. Emma arrived shortly after Robert left. Her energy form was bright yellow, indicating excitement. I've written my cultural assessment, she said. My recommendation is immediate contact and accelerated membership. The humans have something we desperately need. Which is the ability to think outside established frameworks. The Concordat has been using the same military tactics for 3,000 years because they work. But what happens when we face an enemy those tactics don't work against? We'd be helpless. The humans could teach us to adapt. Helen considered both perspectives as she worked on her final draft. Robert was right that humans were unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Emma was right that they offered something valuable. The question was which factor mattered more. On the 4th day she submitted her report to the Concordat Council. The key sections read: Humanity does not fight to demonstrate superiority. They fight to discover weaknesses. Every simulation, every exercise, every battle is treated as an educational opportunity. They actively seek failure because failure reveals problems that need solving. They do not seek perfect strategy because they do not believe perfect strategy exists. Their military philosophy is built on the assumption that all plans will fail when confronted with reality. Therefore, they design their forces to adapt rather than to execute flawlessly. They are the only species we have observed that treats survival as a skill to be practiced rather than an outcome to be assumed. Most species train to win. Humans train to survive losing. Their greatest strength is not technology or numbers. It is cognitive diversity. Every human commander has studied different historical battles, different tactical philosophies, different approaches to warfare. When faced with a problem, they have dozens of potential solutions to draw from. We have observed human captains referencing tactical principles that are thousands of years old, applying ancient wisdom to modern space combat. Recommendation: humanity should be offered Concordat membership with an unusual stipulation. They should be brought in not as warriors or as a military threat, but as tactical consultants and instructors. The galaxy species have fought the same wars in the same ways for millennia. We need what humans offer: the ability to think differently under pressure. The council debated for 3 weeks. Helen remained aboard the quiet reflection, monitoring human communications and gathering additional data. What she saw only reinforced her assessment. The humans had conducted 4 more simulations since Operation Convergence. Each one tested different scenarios. Each one involved tactics that would be considered insane by Concordat standards. And each one generated hours of discussion and analysis among the human commanders. Finally, the council reached a decision. The message arrived encrypted with the highest security protocols. Observer Helen Clark, your report has been accepted with modifications. The council agrees that humanity represents both a potential threat and a valuable opportunity. We have decided to extend an offer of Concordat membership under special terms. You are authorized to make first contact and deliver the invitation personally. Helen read the terms and smiled. The council had been thorough. Humanity would be offered membership, but with specific restrictions and responsibilities. They would have access to Concordat technology and trade, but they would also be expected to contribute their unique perspective on tactical thinking. She took a shuttle down to Earth, landing in Geneva where the United Nations maintained their headquarters. Admiral Thomas Wright met her at the landing pad, along with representatives from a dozen human nations. Senior Observer Clark, Thomas said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. Welcome to Earth. I assume you're here to deliver the Council's decision about our membership application. Helen clasped his hand with 2 of her 6 limbs. I am. The Galactic Concordat has decided to offer humanity membership status, effective immediately. There were smiles and excited murmurs from the human delegation. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That was faster than we expected. We thought the evaluation process would take years. Normally it does, Helen agreed. But your performance during Operation Convergence was enlightening. The Council believes humanity has something unique to offer. Our technology? Asked one of the human diplomats. No. You're thinking. Helen pulled up a holographic display showing the battle simulation. For 3,000 years, the Concordat has refined warfare to near perfection. We have established formations, proven tactics, and predictable strategies. And then we watched you ignore all of it and still accomplish your objectives. Thomas smiled slightly. We failed that simulation. Lost every ship. You failed it in every conventional sense, Helen said. That's precisely why you passed. The Council has seen thousands of species demonstrate their strengths. You're the first species we've seen that deliberately demonstrates their weaknesses to learn from them. She brought up the membership terms. The offer comes with unusual conditions. You'll have full access to Concordat technology and trade networks. But you're also being asked to serve as tactical consultants. To teach our military forces how to think like you do. You want us to teach adaptability, Emma said, appearing in holographic form beside Helen. Exactly. The Concordat has enemies. Ancient enemies who have fought us for centuries using ancient tactics. We've reached a stalemate because both sides follow the same strategic principles. We need someone who can break those principles. Who can think in ways our enemies won't expect. Robert's hologram appeared as well. I must note for the record that I still find human tactics disturbingly chaotic. But I cannot deny their effectiveness. Thomas looked at his fellow humans. There were nods around the group. He turned back to Helen. We accept. Though I should warn you, teaching people to break their own rules is harder than it sounds. We're aware, Helen said. But we're willing to try. The alternative is continuing to fight the same wars the same ways and hoping for different results. That's the definition of insanity, Thomas quoted. At least according to one of our philosophers. Perhaps, Helen agreed. But perhaps a little insanity is exactly what the galaxy needs right now. The formal signing ceremony took place a week later. Humanity became the newest member of the Galactic Concordat, the first species ever admitted specifically for their ability to think differently rather than their technological achievement. As Helen prepared to return to the quiet reflection, Thomas approached her one final time. Can I ask you something? He said. Why did you really recommend us? Was it because you think we can help? Or because you're afraid of what we'd become if you left us isolated? Helen considered the question carefully. Both, she admitted. You're dangerous because you're unpredictable. But you're valuable for the same reason. Better to have you as allies than enemies. Better to learn from you than fight you. Thomas grinned. Honest answer. I appreciate that. One more thing, Helen said. During the simulation one of your captains quoted something. A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. Where does that wisdom come from? A general named Patton. He fought in our Second World War about 80 years ago. And you still study his tactics? We study everyone's tactics, Thomas said. Winners and losers. Ancient and modern. We collect knowledge like some species collect jewels. Because you never know when an old idea might solve a new problem. Helen nodded slowly. That's exactly why the galaxy needs you. We've forgotten how to learn from the past because we assumed we'd perfected everything. You're going to remind us that perfection is impossible, and that's okay. She boarded her shuttle, looking back at Earth one final time. A small blue world that had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy, not through superior weapons or advanced technology, but through superior thinking. As the shuttle lifted off, she sent one final message to the Council. First contact successful. Humanity has accepted membership. Integration will begin immediately. Recommend we start learning from them before our enemies do. The response came quickly, agreed. Welcome to the new age of the Concordat.